Oh, you don't want to slip. Yeah. Okay. We are on air and we are live from FIRESpark Retreat in Queenscliff. We've got a gathering of 30 people here, all looking for inspiration about fire over the weekend. And we're just starting out our panel discussion. We have 4 members on our panel. I'll start from the far end. We have Serena, who you've heard from this morning, the joyful Frugalista. And I'm sure we'll hear more from her over the weekend as well as through this panel discussion. Coming along our row here, we've got Bobby, and he's a member of the Melbourne FIRE Brigade. A bit different to Neil's FIRE Brigade, actually putting out fires. We're a monthly meet-up in Melbourne, so if anyone does want to join, please come and see us for that. Did you want to give yourself a little intro there?
Okay, this works. Thanks, Brenda. Just my claim to fame is creating the group chat, which Brenda administers and does a great job of it. And Scott is also in our group chat. So again, as Brenda mentioned, we do have an RBA Tuesdays meetup in the city, the first Tuesday of every month. Even though the RBA no longer meets once a month, but the name has stuck, so you're all welcome to join us for that going forward. And we do talk about finance, personal finance, but also lifestyle design and what goes on in our daily lives. So, yes, everyone's welcome. Thanks.
And next we have Scott. So if you want to give yourself a quick intro.
Hi, my name's Scott. I am a consultant working in Melbourne, and I've recently started up a blog talking about financial independence, lifestyle design, and the like. I post online under the handle Scott on Fire, and I've got a blog, scottonfire.com. So happy to be a part of the podcast and chat along with everybody here.
And might I point out that that was basically the official launch of the website, because until now Scott's kept it on the down low. So you can give him a bit of encouragement. Feel free to go and join his blog. And last along the line, but not least, we have Pete, or Captain Fire, if you want to give us a quick intro.
G'day. Pete, go by Captain Fire online. Have been blogging and podcasting about my journey to financial independence for a number of years now. And yes, May the 4th, celebrating 2 years of retiring from my full-time flying job.
All right, let's get started. So this one might be a bit of a challenge because I'm sure we'll get some really good, thoughtful answers later on. But our first question, just to get them warmed up, is how do you explain fire to new people? Give us your 30-second elevator pitch. And I'm going to start with you, Pete, because you've got the microphone.
Okay, so I'll preface this with saying bringing fire or financial independence up with strangers is always a recipe for disaster. But if you're stuck in an elevator and they ask you, it would probably start along the lines of, what would you do with your life if money wasn't an issue? And it really centers around finding someone's why, their purpose. Why would they actually do something? I don't know if anyone's read Simon Sinek's book, Start With Why. But generally, if you want to motivate someone to do something, if you want to lead someone, you need to find out what their intrinsic motivations are. So once you've sort of got them hooked, you can start giving them a little bit more meat. And just to keep it briefly, I would say something along the lines of, I don't waste money on things I don't care about so that I can buy things that I do care about. And I use that surplus to invest in growth assets. Those assets work for me so that I don't have to. I can live off the returns and do whatever I want. And if you invest 50% of your income, your working year is only 17 years long. And as we all know, the 25% rule is a good rule of thumb, and that's great for any beginner. Once you've got 25 times your annual spending, you're good to go. I mean, we know in reality there's a few extra things we need to think about, but that's pretty much how I would broach it with someone new.
Definitely got to start somewhere. On to you, Scott.
Alrighty. when I explain FIRE to people, I generally talk about the benefits that you get out of it. So essentially, you get to have a good night's sleep. You just don't need to worry about money. If you build a life around setting yourself up where you have the money that you need, you will rest easy. You have the money that you need to do exactly what you want, and you have the ability to choose work that you love. You know, just because you've got enough money to retire early, chances are we're an industrious lot. We're probably going to end up doing something pretty useful with our time, regardless of whether it makes money or not. But keeping that in mind, you can essentially build a life where you have the safety net that you've built up through financial independence, and you can use that to do exactly what you want with your life, whatever that looks like.
Okay, so picture this. We're in an elevator together. We've only got 30 seconds to our next floor. Now, where is this elevator? Probably an office building. We're probably both at work. I'm looking at my neighbor and I'm thinking, do you really want to be here? You don't look very happy. So what is the way out of this predicament? Well, have you heard of financial independence? Sounds simple enough, right? Well, perhaps you don't want me to talk. Maybe you've got some stranger danger. Okay, well, just look it up in your own time and let the doors open to a wide gamut of... It'll blow your mind. So just know that you have choice. You have choice and you can pursue freedom in this lucky country. And that's one of the best gifts that we can pursue and can be given to us if you reach out for it. So...
Yeah, so if I'm in an elevator, I'd probably just say, well, work is optional for me. And that kind of really floors people because that's not what they're used to. Coincidentally, this week I was asked to speak to a different branch at work, and I did actually have a slide about the FIRE movement. And when explaining, I said, well, this is actually quite a disruptive movement. I'm going to give you some radical ideas here. You know, often, particularly my generation, I was educated that you go to school, you go to university. And of course, not everyone goes to university, but that's my pathway. And then you work, and then you get a job, and then you buy a house, and you get married, you have kids, you buy a bigger house, you buy a car, you buy another car. But what if you chose not to do that? And what if you chose that you didn't want to keep going to work to pay for that stuff? Blows their mind.
Thank you. Obviously, if you're talking to these people and they're new to FIRE and then they maybe start doing some of their own research and they start thinking, oh, I really want to maybe go down this pathway, and they start looking at property or index funds or whatever kind of vehicle they think hopefully potentially not something too high risk. But they keep reading and they keep reading and they keep reading, and they've got a bit of analysis paralysis. Haven't we all been there? I know I definitely was. So what's your best tip for someone who has a bit of analysis paralysis?
I'm holding the mic, so I'll get started. So I think if you're experiencing that paralysis where you've been doing a lot of research, you have so many options, you've looked at this investment class and that investment class, you understand each of them in their own way, but you're still trying to figure out how to make a move where how you make a start investing. Ultimately, I think the best thing to do is figure out what you understand. Figure out if you have enough money, you have the means to actually put that money towards it, and you understand if you put your money towards that thing, what are the costs and benefits of doing that? You know, if you have that money aside, is it better deployed to a mortgage? Is it better put in a savings account? You know, you have all these different ways to deploy your money, and thinking about which ones you understand, which ones you know the benefits of. You just need to pick one and you need to do something with it, because the longer you let your money sit, the worse off it'll be. So the idea is generally you'll want to deploy that, once you've got yourself set up, the emergency fund and the like, deploying that extra money in some fashion is going to be the most ideal thing that you can do. So just pick something and run with it, and you'll make mistakes along the way. We all have, but you can course correct as you go. And it's always about just working towards that North Star, but you'll always be zigzagging on the way there and course correcting as you go. So just get stuck in and get started is my advice. which of course is this of course is not financial advice, but
Yeah, look, I couldn't agree with Scott more. I think there is nobility in action, and at the end of the day, you need to get some skin in the game. So I'll tell you a little short story. So we just moved into acreage, right? And we were expecting there to be a nice ride-on in the garage. There wasn't. The previous owners took it. So we were faced with, what do I do? Like, I need to get a ride-on mower, right? Do I get a big brand new one? Some of them are like $10,000. No, I just got a secondhand one, and that's a good thing because the first day that I was riding around the property, I smashed into a rock and destroyed the cutting deck. Okay, and it was only $1,000, but that's a lot better than destroying a $10,000 mower. So the point I'm trying to make is you start small, you test and adjust. So you don't need to all jump in and, you know, lump sum your life savings, YOLO into some stock or buy an investment property straight away. But it's a good idea to just start small and get some skin in the game, all right? Because then you actually care about it. If you're sitting on the sidelines constantly in fear, looking at news headlines or watching stock market tickers change, it's a bit different. Even when you've got a small amount, $500, $1,000 invested, all of a sudden you've got skin in the game. You'll care, you'll pay attention, and you can scale, test, and adjust. So that's usually my advice.
So I think this does come up very, very often, and we all know someone who does suffer from this, sometimes ourselves as well. I would question, what is the source of this paralysis? Is there simply too much choice? Do we perhaps not want to lose our hard-earned, or is it something else? Is it, is this money beholden to some other purpose? Figuring out what that is quite key. I would also say that we live in an era where all of us are quite blessed with plenty of options and choice. Maybe that's counterproductive sometimes, but to your point, Scott and Pete, it's never been easier to get started. It's never been easier to start small. I remember when I was still a wee lad, stocks were for Wall Street, not for Main Street. And it was very difficult. Now we have all sorts of fintechs, acorns, etc. Oh, should I mention them by name? But point is, yeah, it's very easy to set aside any small amount and start from something is better than start from nothing. So keep it simple, give it a go, and learn from the process and enjoy. So.
Thank you. I definitely endorse imperfect action. In fact, it's something that's really guided everything I do. This, start where you are and start. That said, often when people have suddenly got the, wow, I'm going to be financially independent straight away, they don't yet have any knowledge, and they read things often that are in the media, whether it's the latest crypto or the latest, I'm not sure what the latest thing is at the moment, but NFTs the non-fungible tokens seem to have disappeared. But, there's all sorts of stuff that because I see them in the news and they don't often understand things, and there's a lot of scams with that and a lot of different things. So often, and I don't give people financial advice, obviously, but often it's just starting by listening to them. Like, well, what are you doing? Are you working full time? What are you doing with your super? Have you been to a superannuation information session? Have you understood how it works? Do you know that you could choose a different super fund? That's just like a starting place. This is if they're working and it suits them, and they might not be. In people in small business, it's different. And then it's, well, what are you doing with your home? Where do you live? Like, do you have a mortgage? Do you, rent? Do you plan to buy a place? Do you want to pay it off early? Have you rung your bank recently for a rate review? Oh, can I do that? Yes, you can do that. I know someone who does that every month. Please don't do it every month. Banks will go nuts, but about every 6 months is acceptable time frame, and you'd be surprised the results. So, just starting where you are and then sort of going, well, have you invested in shares before? Oh, no, I never thought about that. Well, who do you bank with? Who might you be able to, use for a brokerage? Because there's a lot now. And back to your point, I remember when I was 16, I had a part-time job at Franklin's, which I had it from when I was 15, and I really wanted to invest in shares because we just had the Black Friday, Black Monday, stock market crash, I think of the 80s. Gosh, this takes me back. I've got 80s music in my head now. It's not going to go away. But, you know, in those days, like as a young teenage girl, and like a lot of women did not invest in those days, let alone young people. Like the only option I had was to go through the yellow pages and find a broker I didn't know and try and do that way. It was just insurmountable. These days it's a lot easier. And so usually I can say, well, it's a lot easier these days. There's a lot of different platforms. Perla is one that, you know, I'm was an early adopter of, an investor, and, you know, I can often, you know, steer them in that direction if it's what they want, you know, disclosing, you know, affiliate links and others that I have, or with their existing, you know, banking situation, and just steering them towards thinking about some of the easier ETFs, you know, such as the Vanguard products. And I know they've had some issues recently with greenwashing, which is a bit naughty, but, you know, it's an easy start. But usually I'm like, you need to do your own research. This is the thing. It's a bit like when people first find God, and it's like they want everyone to go to Bible study, and it's like, and it's just that's fine, but, you know, like not everyone might be there yet on their spiritual path, or they might have a different spiritual path. So a lot of it's actually listening and finding where they are, and then trying to steer them away from the latest scam and the latest get rich quick.
I think in this day and age, you know, watching out for people around you when it comes to scams and that kind of thing is really important, because we are a more so financial savvy group of people. So we maybe have hopefully the ability to spot some of these things, not just for ourselves, but for the people around us. So our next question may or may not be a short answer, but how do you introduce yourself, or how do you plan to introduce yourself once you have fired? So instead of, hi, my name is blah, 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 and my job is blah, 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 what do you say if you no longer have a traditional occupation? And before I pass over to the panel, I just want us to take a moment in the room here for each of us to kind of maybe think about this question, but also think about the fact that sometimes our identity is very much centered around our jobs or our careers. So right now, I want you to think about the one thing that you are good at that isn't related to your job, because this might be the key to how you might introduce yourself in future. What else are you good at, and what else could you describe yourself as? So just take a moment to kind of think about that for your own context. I mean, some of you in the room might obviously already be retired, and you might say, I'm a retired blah, blah, blah. But what else can you describe yourself as? A volunteer? I'm really into something or other, or I run a side business of something because I like to get my hand in. But I'll hand over to you guys now. What do you describe yourself as? Obviously, Pete, you've had round one of retirement and come back out of it. So take it away.
Probably the oldest joke in the book is, you know, how do you know if there's a pilot in the room? It's because they'll tell you. But in general, I think that we do put this big focus on career and what we do. And I feel people, they want to know what you do because they want to know whether they need to treat you with respect or not, which is a bit weird, you know. Oh, you're a doctor. Oh, okay, I better treat you with more respect than if you're a garbage man or something. And I never really sat right with me. So I try and avoid talking about work. In fact, people that might follow the blog and podcast might know that I'm very good at evading any questions about my employment. But these days, I just say I'm taking a break. Yeah, I've had a bunch of family stuff go on, so I just say I'm taking a break from the workforce. If people sort of push and they want to know, I could tell them about my profession. And if they really want to know where I'm getting money, I just tell them I'm running a small IT business as a side hustle. And that's pretty much it.
I have a slightly different approach to yourself, Pete, and I think I'm fairly forthright in this. While I was off, I've recently had a 6-month career break. My previous role was quite busy, and I wanted to figure out sort of what I wanted to do after that role, but also figure out why I was working as hard as I was. And I realized pretty quickly after asking myself that question, I asked it sort of as happenstance at the time, I realized I couldn't actually answer the question, and I didn't know why I was working as hard as I was. So the only thing I could think to do was, do I reduce my hours? Do I go part-time? And I thought, no, I actually just have to quit. And I quit my job. And over those 6 months, I just took time for myself and tried to figure out what exactly I wanted and who I was. And, that's when I ended up finding that, I did actually really enjoy the writing. So now I kind of describe myself as a writer. It's a little bit silly because I am still fairly fresh in the game, but I like to think of myself as a writer and as a creator at this point. And I think that it's taken me a little bit of time to get there. So, even though I'm back at work now, I still do describe myself as a writer. And I think that's who I am. So when people ask me, well, what do you do? It's, I do some consulting here and there, but, I'm a writer, and I think that's pretty cool.
So I think that's a very interesting question. It's a great question. But to your point, Pete, about respect, that very resonant. So a little bit of background about myself. I'm Chinese, and in my community, my diaspora, you're very much defined by your success and your career title, amongst other things. But it's incredibly important for us to have that identity, and not everyone may agree with it. However, it is what it is. So I would say when it comes to respect, I think it comes from a place of who your audience is, who is asking the question. Is it at all important to you to purvey a certain image about yourself? And you may have your own reasons to do that. No one can say it's right or wrong. But knowing your audience is quite important. Obviously, amongst our group here, it's cherished if you were to say that, oh, I'm retired. It's great. Good for you. But not in all instances. So if that is of importance to you, then perhaps you may want to think about this. And when I was thinking about it, if and when I do get to that point, I read some interesting comments online talking about this particular question. And some of the, now granted it was from a singles page, Singles in Pursuit of Fire, amongst all things. And this topic does come up. And the context was, okay, so you're on a date. And how would you describe yourself when you inevitably get asked, what do you do? And, it may be a bit iffy to say, oh, I'm retired. So for various reasons, potential asset protection being amongst one of them. But nevertheless, I thought it was quite relatable. Some comments did come up with, oh, I'm a fund manager, or I'm a property manager. It's not exactly lying, is it? Especially if you do have a... But at the same time, you're sort of, thinly veiling the truth as well in a way that sort of, gets the point you need to across, that you are doing something productive with your life. So I found that quite interesting. So yes, definitely know your audience and what's appropriate in the circumstances, I would think. Yeah, and I guess the last thing I would add to that is sometimes it doesn't need to be that we need to necessarily shout and scream our success to the world. We can be quietly wealthy. We can be, happy in our circumstances and not have to make a song and dance about it. So, just some food for thought.
This is a great question. I remember in Your Money All Your Life where they talked about how much it's defined about I am are. And I certainly is something that really resonated with me, and it probably kept me in my career as a diplomat with the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade for probably too long, even though I wasn't happy. That ego, being able to say, I work with DFAT. It kept me there. I am a diplomat. It kept me there way too long. In my book, The Joyful Startup Guide, I talk a lot about networking in a chapter, and one thing I'm really big on is actually discouraging people from asking that question of, so what do you do? Because it's so loaded. You don't know what people are doing. And they could be taking a career break. They could have just had a nervous breakdown at work or, mental health issues, which often happens, like particularly with business networking. That's often why they're there, to recreate their life in a different direction. They could have children at home and be really sensitive about it, or, you just don't know. So there are other ways you can frame that, just so you avoid putting other people in that situation. Like, what brings you here, or, how long in this forum, how far along are you in the FIRE journey? Are you currently working full time, or are you doing something else? There's ways that you can do it in a more inclusive way to avoid that question. Now, when I do get asked that question, it's kind of because I'm a multi-hyphenate, it's kind of what story do I wish to tell today? And that's actually quite fun, actually. Sometimes I'm a writer, sometimes I'm a podcaster, sometimes I'm an angel investor, sometimes I'm an editor, sometimes I'm in the public service. It depends where I am. So, people aren't often interested in you. It's just like a sort of a stock standard question. So you can kind of say what you like, really. Make your own story.
All right. So the next question, the next two I'm actually going to combine into one because they are kind of related, just in conscious of time. So if you have already or are you planning to change from full-time to part-time? And if you are going down that track, so we've got things like semi-fi, and we've got coast fi, and we've got barista fi, and we've got flamingo fi. So we've got all these different kind of flavors of fire. And I think the rhetoric does seem to be going more and more towards people, rather than just working full-time and eating rice and beans and saving as much as possible and then falling off the retirement cliff. A lot of the discussion, certainly at our monthly meetups, is about how do we actually create that time freedom now with the resources that we have while we continue to build our portfolios or what have you in the background. How do we plan for that? So I think I wanted to ask our panel today, are they planning to, I guess, notch down or go to part-time, or have they had experience going to part-time? And if they envision that for themselves, going to part-time, or have, how do they sort of structure their day or their week? What does their daily sort of schedule look like, or how do they envision that for their semi-retirement or they're into their retirement?
Okay, this is a really good question. And I'll expand a little bit on this tomorrow when I talk a little bit more about my journey to FIRE and my career. With the caveat that this is Chatham House rules, and I'd like it to just stay in this group. Yeah, hence why I'll talk about it more tomorrow. But the thing with my career is there wasn't really an option with my employer to step down. In fact, there were some significant financial disincentives to step down to part-time work. So I'm not sure how many of you know my story, but I essentially left full-time work and became a full-time unpaid carer for my parents, and particularly my mum, who unfortunately did pass away. And so going from essentially a professional job as a pilot to becoming an unpaid carer and, cleaning bed sheets and that kind of stuff, it was a bit of a shock. Again, lost that identity. But the real shock came after her passing, because all of a sudden I had no purpose, and there was that retirement cliff. And it was very scary, and I didn't really know what to do with myself and what to do with my time. Fortunately, I had a blog and podcast, and that was something that I could put focus and attention into. Wouldn't call it necessarily a distraction, but it was certainly a productive use of my time. And running a small business with a number of websites, it was giving me the ability to work part-time on something that was productive. So if I had a choice, I would definitely recommend stepping down, 4-day weeks, 3-day weeks, that kind of stuff. That would be, I think, a more sensible option. In terms of the second question was, how do you organise your day? Is that right, Brenda? Yep. So the short answer is I don't. We just kind of do whatever. The thing is, I used to be a shift worker, right? And so like flying red-eye flights, or like getting up at 2 a.m., 1 a.m., watching the sunset and then watching the sun rise on the same flight. It's grueling, and it's really bad for your health So I'm just really relishing not setting an alarm. And actually, I didn't set one this morning, but I, miraculously woke up at the right time. Morning routine, we usually just get up, basic hygiene, brush your teeth. We have a cup of tea, do some stretching on the deck, watch the sunrise, take the dog for a walk, go for a, walk around the block. And then it's usually just around the garden. So pottering, maybe we'll plant some trees. Yesterday, before we flew up here, we put 40 fruit trees into the front orchard, which is awesome. And then it's, what are we going to do at the moment? We're outfitting our house. But previously, when we were living in Adelaide, we might go for a bushwalk or visit some friends. Really just whatever is on the schedule for the day is what we want to do.
Alrighty, thanks, Pete. I do want to just talk a little bit about one of the points that you made around having the ability to actually reduce your hours. I know in my last job, one of the things I found was that was one of the challenges that I came across. I wanted to reduce my hours and, essentially either work less hours in the day or just less days in the week. And then I found very quickly when I started to figure out if this was possible in my last job, which was sort of consulting on lots of little projects, I found that I had some clients that I would support every day, and they wouldn't be happy with me taking one day off straight away. And I was finding every day that I was working extra hours sort of at the end of the day anyway. So if I ended up going to 4 days a week, I'd still just be working the same 40 hours. It would just be squashed into 4 days. And then I'm out a day's pay as well, which is just not ideal. So it is definitely worth figuring out, is this possible in your own role? And I've had a couple of conversations at some of our meetups where I posed the question of, if you could magically make 20% of your job disappear, you lose 20% of your pay as a result, would you do it? And if you would, then great. Maybe there's a way for that to happen, but it's not always something that everyone can do. So you have to figure out, if you like what you do, is there a way to do what you do and also do that? And that's what led me to take on my new role, which is specifically consulting for one client, and it's 4 days a week, which is working really well. And it's about, perhaps your current job doesn't allow you the flexibility to do just that if you do want to reduce your hours, but your actual industry or the work that you're performing has the ability to be squashed into a different format that works for you. And if you can find that, that's certainly ideal. I did have another point, but it's sort of eluding me now. Yeah, we can circle back around, but yeah, Bobby, take it away.
Thanks, Scott. So many of us love spreadsheets, including myself. That's one of my favorite pastimes, to run countless Monte Carlo simulations. So I envision that that's what I'll be doing once I actually... No, but on a serious note, one day I was getting a little bit bored with, just having a lot of free time, I guess, and on the weekend, which isn't very much at all, right? But I decided to do a quick calculation, or the effect on taxable income if I was to go down from 5 days to 4 days a week. So that's a 20% saving in time at work, and it only led to a 16% reduction in tax. Now, I know numbers can sound very dry, but numbers are a big part of the equation. And I thought, well, this, in any measure, this is a great trade-off, 4%. But I mean, if you reduce it even further, it goes up by even more. And to this point, I wanted to credit Brenda for this, because I believe, Brenda, you actually figured this one out earlier than I did. I didn't give credit where it was due the first time. So kudos to you for that. So I guess as an illustration, if that is meaningful to you, then that's definitely a worthy consideration of, if it's available to you, can you go down in time spent at work, and is the saving worth it? The other thing would be, okay, so once you do get there, how do you structure your day? Well, have you ever had the feeling when you're busy at work and you just want to get out of there because there's so much you haven't done yet? There's so much you're just waiting to be, for your attention. Oh, well, where are all those things? Once they're still there, they're still waiting for you to do. There's are there people that you care about? Are there purposes that you would find truly meaningful in your life to pursue? That those are all waiting for you. So don't fret. There will be plenty. I believe that everyone has it in them to not get really hung up on not having anything to do once they've reached that point. Things will come to you. It's almost a certainty. Yeah. So
That's very Zen, or 4th of May there. The things will come to you. But yeah, I hear that. So my path is a bit sort of unusual. So, full-time work up until October 2019. And I remember that date because my last day at work was Halloween. I just sort of, was thinking which day, the end of the month. And then I went, oh, Halloween. Well, I'll always remember that, won't I? So every time Halloween comes around. And then I went back part-time, same department, about 18 months later. So a colleague contacted me, and this is an important thing, the value of networks. Like, you might think you're never going to go back at work again, but you never know. And all of the jobs that I've had recently have all been through networks, people contacting me, go, oh yeah, we need someone. So keep those networks strong. And, it's sometimes people think that networking is all about like self-promotion and, is somehow morally wrong, but no, it's not. It's just showing an interest in other people. And if you do the right thing by people and you share information and you're, professional, you'd be surprised the sort of impressions you make. But anyway, so I went back for about 6 months. I had 2 back-to-back non-ongoing kind of contracts and working part-time. And, I actually struggled in that part-time role. I really did. It was hard. It was like a mental switch. Like, I already was doing a lot of different things. And then it's like, now I'm in work mode. And it was a very fast moving area. And now I had to catch up with all the media and I had to do everything and find out what was happening. And the other thing too was it was really hard to switch off. And I'm finding this increasingly back in the public service. We're just all working crazy hours. But, there was like a WhatsApp chat with the group. And so, it wasn't just you are off for the day. It was like, there's a 7:30 report on. There's this podcast you need to watch. This is on the news. And so that was constantly pinging. So you were never really off. And unavoidably, things like deadlines would often fall to the day that you weren't working. And even though you'd prepare for it, your boss hadn't cleared something. So then you'd have to log on to the system. It'd take ages to log on the system, get on the secure system, check he hadn't done it. Yeah, okay, hasn't done it. Remind him, get off the system, then come back this afternoon. You're nodding a little bit. Like, this is something that unavoidably happens. So it's quite painful. So when I went back the next time, and I'd preferred to come back on contract, but this current government, for various reasons, the federal government's discouraging consultancy. So it was really going back fully back in the public service, which wasn't really what I wanted. But I was approached again and it was good. And I said, look, can I go part-time? And they said, look, just do full-time initially and then we'll talk about it. So I sort of got the hint from that. But then, yeah, I know, but I was like, it got me in the door. But then actually I stopped and I thought about it. And one of the reasons I quit rather than go part-time when I did was because of how my superannuation is. And some of the people here have had similar defined benefit schemes, or we've chatted about will understand this, but I was on a particular scheme that's no longer offered called the PSS. Not as good as the CSS that my husband's on. His is pretty awesome. My accountant says I've won the lottery marrying him. He's pretty good. But I'm on the PSS, and it's a defined benefit, and it has a formula, and the formula in part is based on your average income over the last 3 years, or as of your birthday. So if I went part-time and I'm on that scheme, it really financially disadvantages me. But if I am on that scheme, it really advantages me. Plus, there's a specific rule in there where I can make up to 10% contributions rather than the standard, I think 2.8, and I'm matched by that. So like, there's a huge financial incentive for me to be full-time. And actually I find the mental loads a lot better. Like, I actually have time to catch up with people and do things. It does make it crazy busy doing everything else on the side. I don't recommend it, but it's just something that I worked out in terms of how it stacked up, the money and everything else, it just kind of worked. In terms of structuring your day, I was really bad at this when I left. I would end up staying up too late watching, reading crappy, really bad novels. So if anyone's interested, I have an interest in paranormal or romance. Don't ask, especially shapeshifters, like really weird stuff. It's just like it's an escapism thing I developed during COVID. And so then I'd start way too late and I'd get up way too late and then I'd, kick myself and I wouldn't exercise enough because I thought I should be working really hard and doing all this stuff. It just wasn't quite as good. I did co-work one day a week in the Canberra Innovation Network. So I purchased a space and I'd go in there one day a week and I'd actually talk to people. But I just really love the socialisation and the routine of going to work. I'm actually a lot happier. It's actually much better for my mental health, which is weird because I left because it was bad for my mental health.
But I think you need to take these chances and make these changes to actually realise that, actually work's not so bad. For me, I've just taken a year off, some of it planned, some of it thanks to the federal government's very long recruitment processes. But I have in the past worked 4 days a week. And then I sort of took on another role with more responsibility and I didn't want to give up my Fridays off because that sleep in is amazing. So I actually went to a condensed work week of 4 days, but 10-hour days, which is not practical for potentially people with kids or after work things. But Monday to Thursday, that was my work hours. I would get things done. And then I'd have a long weekend every weekend. Some of the other things that come up in our fire group, some people do purchased leave. So that they can have extra time off throughout the year. So some people use it just to, give themselves a day or fortnight off by using that purchase leave. Other people, there's a few of us are kind of travel fanatics, so we use it to go overseas. But there's so many options, not in everybody's career and not in every role. But if you do have it, it's definitely worth exploring how you can change your work, maybe to make it more manageable in the short term.
Just a quick plug though, while we have the opportunity, if you are after a little bit of structure, then come to RBA Tuesdays, first Tuesday of every month. So we'll be there with open arms. Complimentary sparkling water.
The next question, I'm actually not going to ask the panel this question. I'm going to ask the question, and Doc G, not that he knows it, Doc G is an American podcaster, and himself and Brad from Choose FI, if anyone listens to Choose FI, they recently attended the Economy Conference, which I guess in some ways is a little bit like our weekend gathering here, but it's a bit more conference style. They have hundreds of people there and lots of different talks. And I listened to this podcast recently and I knew I'd had this question on the panel interview, but I thought Doc G probably described the answer perfectly. So I'm just going to use his answer to answer this question. So the question is, with so many different types of fire out there now, which we sort of discussed before, the flamingo fires and semi-fires and barista fires, heard one recently, forklift fire, which I kind of thought, is it just like Strong Money Australia? He used to be a forklift driver. But no, it means that you do all the hard lifting at the start, which I thought that's basically what fire is anyway. But do you think that the concept of fire has actually been watered down or altogether eroded? So let's see if I've timed this right. Hold on.
The reason I want you all to hear, Roger, is because right now I want you to all stand up and clap for him because he just did the ultimate act of vulnerability.
Sorry, 4 seconds too early.
And Roger, these are your people. These are the people who are going to help you figure out what it looks like and how it can get better. And that's why we're here today. And that was just guest one. I am going to bring up our second guest now. Allison, I met for the first time just literally 2 days ago. We were at the Thursday event. I walked by her on a patio at the bar. Not only did her smile light up the room, but she said something to me that made me stop and listen. And let me tell you, I've heard just about everything. I'm not just a podcaster, but a doctor. I talk to people about crazy stuff. And yet she stopped me in my tracks. Allison, I walked up to you when we were talking and you said, look, I feel comfortable talking for and working for billionaires. I feel comfortable talking and working for movie stars, rock stars.
Sorry, I think technical difficulties. I don't think I've got the right time into the podcast. So sorry about that. But basically the answer was apparently Doc G couldn't answer it because I timed it badly. The answer basically was that, yes, there's all these other types of fire out there. But I don't think that it does actually water down the concept behind fire. I think actually we just need to go back to and it's already been mentioned multiple times on the panel, what is the reason that we're doing this? If the reason we're doing this is because we have a stressful job and really don't like it in the moment, and I think a lot of people through COVID found fire because that was their situation, then sure, try and cut down your work or change your career and try and get out of it as quickly as possible so you can free up your time. But if it's because you want to spend more time with your kids, for example, while they're young, then give yourself that financial boost while you can in your 20s. And then when obviously kids come along, then you can work part-time and still be financially stable. Or maybe you are like some of us that are travel fanatics and you really just want to free up your time so you can do those things whenever you want. So I think it really does come back to that why of FIRE, and you really need to have a think about, is it the time that I'm trying to create, or is it because I want that financial comfort? Some of us, we discussed earlier that we have a lot of vulnerabilities around money. So some people like to have that portfolio behind them just for that safety side of things. So no, I don't think that FIRE has been watered down, despite sometimes what the media says. But I think all of these different concepts are actually just making it more inclusive for FIRE, for more people to bring it into their own lives, no matter what their career or their family circumstances. So sorry about the technical difficulties there. I thought I'd timed it perfectly. All right, so on to our next question. So what are some of the risks you see in pursuing FIRE?
Yeah, it's a good question, and there's quite a few. So I've just got a little dot points that I've put down. But the first one, obviously, is living too long and running out of money. Like, another one is, if we're going to really be putting a lot of our capital into growth assets, people say you need to have the stomach to go through a downturn, and it's hard to know whether you do or not until you're in the moment. How many of us felt sick during that COVID crash? Well, was it really a crash? A 20-30% correction in, a short period of time. I certainly was questioning what I was doing, and I'm glad I wrote it out. But, like I said, there's no guarantee. And if you don't have the stomach for that, or if your asset allocation isn't in accordance with your values, then, it might be very excruciating when that kind of thing happens. Another big risk, and this is something that I have a lot of personal experience from, is alienating friends and family who just don't get it. I had a lot of coworkers as well, and a lot of people just thought I was crazy. So I found it easier to basically withdraw and not talk to those people about FIRE, financial independence, investing in the plans. Another one that I have personal experience with is actually regretting spending on certain things. And I was talking to a couple of people yesterday about this, is that when I was at university, my close friend group went to New Zealand on a bit of a boys trip. And they had a lot of fun. They drank a lot of beer. I think they did naked bungee jumping or something ridiculous. Yeah. But the point is, it comes up every time we all catch up. That story about going down to Queenstown in New Zealand and doing these silly things. And I really wish that I could, have been there and have that memory. But at the time, I had different financial priorities. Actually, I wasn't investing. I was actually investing in myself. I was spending all my money on flight training. And I didn't want to, shell out the $5,000 or whatever it was for the week over in New Zealand. And I look back and I always wish that I had done that. So just be aware that is a potential risk if you're going all in with high savings rates into FIRE, is that you may come to regret not spending on certain things. Another really big risk, and this is something that Vince Scully from the Life Sherpa, so he's an actual financial advisor, and so he knows what he's talking about, and he talks about cutting your nose off despite your face when retiring early. And the fact is that you are the best source of income in your life. Like, investments are great, investment property shares, on businesses, that they're great, but you and your earning capital is really important, and that's why we have income protection insurance, right? So if you're a professional and you're earning over six figures and you decide to retire early and, let's just say, argument's sake, $100,000 a year income, and you've decided to retire early by 30 years, back of the envelope maths, there's $3 million that you've left on the table. And if should you want to come back and re-enter the workforce, it can be tricky with a bit of a resume gap. So that's another risk. And lastly, just want to broach the topic with mental health issues. As someone who basically had a high savings rate and was very focused on, having a very full-on accumulation phase and wanting to retire as soon as possible, I overloaded myself. So in addition to, working a full-time job, I was also running my own business. I was doing property development. I was building websites. I was working other flying jobs on the weekend, doing, ad hoc flying instruction, joy flights, that kind of stuff. And there was a lot. When you throw in some family health issues, the workload became significant. And when you're sort of obsessing about fire and money, all of a sudden it sort of doesn't become fun anymore. So you risk turning something which is a really positive thing into something that can actually be a source of stress and anxiety, which you don't really need. So those are my top risks, and it's worth thinking about those risks so that you can mitigate them.
Alrighty, very comprehensive. I feel like we're running out of risks for ourselves, but that's all good. But no, that was fantastic. I think I want to call out specifically, losing sight of the why you're kind of on the path. The whole point is to, retire early, to build time to do exactly what you love. I feel like if you're so focused on just the saving and, trying to achieve that number as soon as possible, you lose sight of what the end goal is the end goal ends up becoming the number, not you being able to live the life that you want to live. And the problem then is you hit the number and you're like, fantastic, I've saved all this money, now all my problems will go away. And they don't. And you realize that you're at the top of the mountain and you've climbed up the completely wrong mountain. So I think my thought around this is you need to kind of figure out along the way what you're doing this for and what does that ideal life look like for you. And then if you've put everything in motion, you're saving enough, you're meeting that percentage rate saving that you need in order to reach the goal. The goal of hitting your fine number is a byproduct of living the life that you want to live rather than the goal in and of itself. And I think for me, at least, that was something that I kind of had to come to terms with myself. And you see all the, fire bloggers, and it's a hot topic where it comes up where, the hitting the number isn't the goal, building the life you want is. And really I could read that and think, nah, I just need to save the money and then it'll be all good. But no, I feel like in a lot of cases, I think a lot of people in the room are, feeling a similar way. Like you have to really think about what you want and then work towards that while working towards fire. And that will, it'll work out in the end. You just have to be on the right path for yourself and what you want to do with your life.
Thanks, Scott. Well spoken. And I'll just echo your point that, Pete, you haven't really left much for the rest of us. But if I could just add one risk, I believe, and I guess on a more personal note, experienced as well. From what I could gather in the early days of this concept of fire, it was very much about, saving more than you spend and getting to a magical number that's personal to all of us. But at that point, there wasn't as much discussion about, but then what next? And what I found is, I guess through some personal experiences, for example, people like my grandmother, who is no longer with us, she'd been saving her entire life. And when I talk about saving, extreme. So, for example, she'd only eat half her meal, save the next half for the next mealtime, amongst other things. And yeah, I guess in her golden years, one could reasonably expect that now it's time to enjoy your life a little bit after all these decades of hard work and hard saving. But no, she got to that point and it just didn't happen. And I think that is definitely a key risk. We're sort of, we can be our own worst enemy sometimes, because, rightly so, we've definitely put a lot of heart and soul into this journey and we get there. But then when it comes crunch time, somehow, some way, it's just so difficult to loosen those purse strings. So what that comes down to perhaps is just as Scott said, remembering your why. Why did you start out on this journey? Well, remember again all those feelings and emotions that were leading up to this point. And you only live once. So enjoy while you can, I suppose. Thanks.
Thank you. Risks of fire. So yeah, I have another grandmother story. My Nana Irene passed away in 2020, not from COVID, but during COVID, and she was based on the other side of here. Actually, in her final year, she was in Sorrento, and she died during that period of time where Melburnians couldn't go more than 5 kilometres, so there was no funeral. It was a bit sad. Just to indulge a bit more, some of you may have known that Skipping Girl, that neon sign in Victoria. So she was the model behind that. She worked for the company, the neon sign company that designed that. She had her first job at age 14. Anyway, why I'm talking about my Nana Irene is she died at the ripe age of 99. She had always wanted to live to 100. She used to talk about that a lot. She had a great aunt who'd lived even longer, to 103, and she didn't quite make it. But I had done a road trip down to visit her about 6 months before she died. Thankfully, just weeks before COVID lockdown. How lucky was that? And she only had a couple of $1,000s left. I was speaking to my aunt, who was her main carer, and it was fine because she was in a nursing home, and it was fine because the daughters would have been able to put their hands in their pockets. But right there's a key risk, right? We don't know how long we're going to live. And it's sad, and I miss her a lot. She's such an inspiration for so much of my frugal lifestyle, and I reference her a lot, particularly in my first book. I still come up with recipes and crazy stuff she did. Like I said, she washed like cling wrap. She was ahead of her time on the environmental message in a crazy way. But, had she still been living, 4 years on, it's actually a really difficult issue. It's a really difficult issue getting people into nursing homes. Really difficult. Aged care is really difficult. I have another friend whose parents moved to Gundagai. So great, geo arbitrage, let's move to a regional town in retirement. We can live as long as we like. What happens? There's no nurses, no care in her aged care. Suddenly then, as she's really sick, having to move her back to Canberra. And even then in Canberra, it's really hard to get aged care. In my former DFAT life, we saw a lot of people who moved overseas, usually to places like Thailand or Cambodia. Yay, we can go and party in the pub every night because we're on retirement. And then suddenly they get sick, no medical care. So, that's a key risk, thinking about our end of life, and particularly as there's a discussion about die with zero. We don't know how long we're going to live. We don't know the cost of medical care. We don't know if medical care is going to be available. It's not kind of fun to think about, to be honest. I prefer thinking about the traveling the world and having heaps of time to watch Netflix. But, we do need to think about those sorts of things, and also to, the cost of living. I mean, we've seen what's happened in the last 2 years. It's been phenomenal. And unfortunately, as Australia comes out of its mining boom and we're going into a net zero transition, huge energy transition, it's going to have an impact on all of our cost of living, and it's sobering. We don't really want to think about that, but it's the truth. And then just our lives change. Like now I've got a son who likes to play table tennis, and I wrote about this in Money Magazine last year. I went, well, how expensive is table tennis, right? Like in years gone by, people had it in their garage. It was just like, the cheap thing to do, like here, go on holidays and play table tennis. Well, he's got the special shoes and he's got the special uniform, and he does group coaching. He does one-on-one coaching. We're going to Mandurah in July. He's just been to Geelong. We just found out we're going to Sydney later this month, which was news to us. But anyway, so we've got to find 2 nights of Airbnb accommodation. So there's an extra $1,000, easy, just dropped. So, your lifestyle does change. And yes, I could choose to say, look, we're just going to be FIRE. We're just going to be really frugal. Your mum's frugal, so you just practice borrow someone else's garage and practice. But, that's his dream. I'm in a position to be able to fund that, and that's important to him. It's important to me. I do have another child, and he's important too. We keep him in the garage. We keep him in the garage. No, he has a different pathway. They're actually very close, the two of them, but he's a teenager, so he's I love both my children. They're just different. But I talk about the youngest particularly because he has that dream. Anyway, I have to find another story about elder child now. Thank you.
All right. Well, on that sobering note, we'll come back to Bob's point for the final question, and kind of thinking about switching from being a saver and switching to being a spender. So our final question, we're going to make it a quick Choose FI style hot seat question. What's the one purchase you have made in the last year that has made the biggest difference to your life?
Now I could say, it's this acreage I've moved into. That was only a week ago. Honestly, it's awesome, but to be honest, it's the ride-on mower. I spent 7 hours with a push mower, and I didn't even do the whole bloody property. And I've got this push mower. Even though I stuffed it up on the first day that I got it, it's fixed and it's in the shed waiting for me when I get home.
I think the biggest thing for myself in the last 12 months that I've purchased was setting up a business and all the costs that are associated with that. It sounds a little bit lame, but after I quit my job, I wanted to figure out how I could take control of how I earned a living. And the easiest way for me to do that was to start my own business, do my own consulting through that. And that's been something for me that even though I'm not currently working through that business, it was kind of a mindset shift for me to say, well, now I'm in control of what I'm earning and how I work. And I think that's helped me a lot in terms of the new job that I've taken and how that's going to be influencing me over the next few months and years.
So that's very easy for me. It's the ticket to come here, Brenda, of course. The needed, no, and perhaps something else. It's not really one purchase in particular. It's more a series of giving. I've been giving some money to my mum to help out with her mortgage, and also set up, for retirement herself. And that's been incredibly meaningful to me, because it came a time where I realized, this lady, she was a single mum when I was growing up. So she dedicated her life to putting me through school and looking after me when I was younger. And now that I've learned what I have, perhaps it's great to give back a little, apply that knowledge to action, and whatever the results are from those decisions around investing and other financial matters, give back. And so that's been a good experience for me. So
thank you. The party boxes, is that what we call them, Neil, these things? The party boxes. So we bought 2 of them. Actually, Neil bought them. And actually, I ended up buying them as a business expense because I had a launch party. But really, I shouldn't say this too loudly. We also had Neil's eldest daughter was getting married, and she asked him to do the sound system. And we originally were going to hire them. And then Neil said, no, I really want to buy these things. And I was like, a bit like, well, I'm frugal. But, I use it so often, like coming down here, right? Next thing we're doing, a live podcast and Christmas karaoke. We have karaoke Fridays. I did a Friday nights TJIF, and we had a charity event last year. And suddenly people are like, "What are we going to do with the sound system?" It's like, guess what? We've got the party box. So it's been really great. So equipment is fantastic.
Thank you. And that wraps up our panel discussion this morning. We've totally blown through our time schedule. So let's take just a 10-minute break. I'll go break out the bickies to go with our morning coffee, and then we'll